All right, good morning, good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us today. We'll start as we always do by standing for the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. So just some programming notes before we get started with our program today. One of the things we talked about beginning to do this year, 2024, with our meetings, and kind of harkening back to the way the meetings used to run, is giving the audience a little more information about what's happening with our organization, your organization, for those of you who are a part of it. So just to kind of augment your understanding of what we do here before we actually start the program. So just to let you know, we are wrapping up our annual membership drive. So if you are a member, we thank you for your ongoing support. If you have not become a member, please consider picking up a membership slip on your way out, because we do appreciate our members. We'd like to make sure the news of the community is getting out. And as you can see, the museum benefits greatly from the membership, and also the membership is necessary because we need volunteers, we need people to kind of help provide new ideas and new information for the organization. New things going on here. We recently received a Bender grant from the Bender Foundation, and that is going to augmenting our archival supplies. On your way out, if you look to the left, you'll see a gray large map case. That's actually replacing ancient wooden cases we had for all of our large flat documents. We have a number of large historic deeds and surveys and maps that need to be kept in a flat position, and Roger Wilbur, our archivist, does a great job of maintaining all the paper here. But those new files really do step up the organization's ability to protect the documents and the legacy of the community we have here. So thank you to the Bender Foundation for accepting our grant application. We're also in the process of developing and having produced 2 to 3 new education or historic markers for the community. They're blue and gold markers, although blue and gold are only state ed. We'll probably create these as blue and gold, which is recognizable as historic markers in any community. And we're looking for ideas. We have places we think that deserve to be marked in the community, but we look to our community as well. You know, parts and corners of your neighborhoods and places that we may not know as well. So please feel free, if you have a thought about what you feel should be designated with a historic marker, so people passing through the community understand it better, just drop us an email, and we'll put it into our group, and hopefully by the time the year's out, we'll have 2 to 3 new markers up in the community recognizing Cleveland's and Ravenna's history. We also want to take a minute to thank the Sturgis family. We recently received a tremendous archive of material from Harry Sturgis's collection. Harry, a founding member of the organization, a great historian, a great friend and friend of this organization. His family kindly donated Harry's massive, lifelong collection of documents and papers and research to the organization. It's going to take us a long time to get an accession, but we are so thankful for the Sturgis family thinking of us and making us the primary location for those archives. And that is the kind of material we are growing and housing here. So we are a research facility as well as not just a museum or a place to get a lecture, but we also are growing our research capabilities into the 21st century. So we're very excited about that. And lastly, we ask you as people who come and join us for lectures, members of the community, if you have ideas that you think would fit into the museum for an exhibit that you've not seen here, or if you have an idea for a lecture that you'd like to hear, again, drop us a line. If you know someone that you think would be a great lecturer, we're always looking to add people to our calendar for 24 and 25. So again, reach out. We can't do any of this without your support. Upcoming events on February 11th at 2 p.m. Reverend Antonio Booth and Dr. Roxanne Jones Booth will be here to give a presentation on the Great Migration, early 20th century influx of black labor, black farmers, and others leaving the South as part of Jim Crow, moving to the North, and how they were being assimilated into the communities. And Ravenna, Queens at the time, had a tremendous amount of labor coming from the south through the brickyards. And the Reverend Booth will be here to talk about how that affected Queens and what a strong impact it had on the community as a whole. So we look forward to that. It's a part of our history that we don't spend enough time talking about, and it's great that as an organization we're beginning to tell those stories as well. On March 10th at 2 p.m., Charles Starks from the USS Slater will be here. I know, Jonathan, you know Charlie Starks?
Just in passing.
We'll be here to talk about the history of the USS Slater and its restoration. And then wrapping up the spring talks, April 14th, Gerald Feynman, who published a book on Anna Ward Perkins, the book named The Pioneering Life and Service of Anna Ward Perkins, MD. For those of you who don't know Dr. Perkins, she practiced in the hill towns out of Westerlo from 1928 until her death in 1993. So remarkable history about a very early woman doctor who really had a remarkable career in history, fitting into a community in an area that female doctors and her politics and her lifestyle wouldn't be a fit you would think would be easy. But she made it seamless and really was a beloved fixture for the hill towns and the western part of our own town. So really looking forward to all three of these. Hope you will join us for those. Which brings us to the main event. Jonathan Palmer is joining us, and for those of you who don't know Jonathan, he has a pretty impressive resume that he's built and continues to grow. Currently the archivist for Ulster County, formerly was the archivist for Greene County Historical Society and the Vetter Memorial Library, where he did a tremendous job at bringing that archive's history to life, interacting with the web and beginning to get a lot of those documents available via the web. He was named as the Assistant Greene County Historian in 2020, and in 2021 officially became the Greene County Historian. For those of you who don't know about county historians, there are 62 of them. And Jonathan stands out amongst them for many reasons, but one, he's probably 40 or 50 years younger than most of them. It is a real testament to his research ability and activity as an archivist, researcher, and historian that Greene County entrusted that job to him. So we're really excited that he rose to that title. Jonathan also is a regular columnist. He writes history columns for both the Mountain Eagle and the Daily Mail, and there are scores of them that he has produced over the years. He maintains the Greene County Historians blog, and he can be frequently found lecturing. If you look him up on YouTube, you'll find him all over the place giving lectures. Some of them really interesting, kind of taking history to places we don't normally go. And he can also be found touring, hosting tours through Greene County, and especially through the Greene County cemeteries where some great history exists. So we were really happy he chose to breach the Greene County line and slip north a little bit to join us today, but you're going to find out his being here today and the connection of this topic of hay presses and the town of Queens have something very close in common. So with that, Jonathan, thank you for joining us.
All right, hey, yeah, everybody can hear me all right? That's nice. All right, so after John kindly built me up, I'm going to take myself back down a peg here. Anybody who wants to know about my work at the Vetter Research Library, Janie Kless in the back can give you all of the details in the dirty laundry about how good I actually was or wasn't at that job. Any project like that, any project like this place is a group effort. And with that in mind, I did want to also call out Lynn Christie, who's here today, who is the reason that this talk even became a thing. Now, I should say, on this extensive resume that was provided to you all from me, the one thing that's missing on there is IT specialist. So this is the second time we're giving this talk about the Vanderzee hay press and about hay presses in general in the Upper Hudson Valley. And because I'm not an IT guru, the slideshow itself is missing. I have lost access to it on my iCloud drive. So we don't have a slideshow today. I'm just going to wing it. But we're going to be talking about this. I'd like it to be more of a seminar setting, a conversation. And throughout this whole thing, I'd like you all to bear in mind again that the reason this happened is because one day Lynn decided that she had an important historical artifact and that she wanted to endow the people of the county with that thing to spend time with, to study, to understand. You're all empowered to make choices like that at some point in your lives. I've been at a lot of small town historical societies, small historical associations and group meetings like this, and very few of them are as well endowed or as ideally situated as the Ravenna Queens Historical Society. I'm a little embarrassed to say it's my first time here, but this is a testament to everybody's support, and it's really, really special to be here today. So if you'll all bear with me with this technical snafu, we're going to wade into the history of the hay press, which is the most boring thing you never thought you wanted to know about, but is actually really, really, really cool. So just to lay the groundwork here, the Greene County Historical Society was the recipient of a stationary hay press, and I think this goes back to, what, 2013 we received this, 2010, way before my time. The society received this thing, and the trouble with hay presses is they're big, they're unwieldy. So it kind of languished in a couple different places for a number of years until the Greene County Historical Society was able to reconstruct a hay barn on Route 9W and build the hay press back into a barn in the way it had originally been installed at the Vanderzee farm on the Greene-Albany County line. So this hay press, once installed, presented lots of interpretive opportunities and lots of questions. The biggest one was, how old is this thing? You know, who designed it? Who built it? And why would it be used? You know, why is something like this something that's so typical of the types of farm implements that are used by farms here in the Upper Hudson Valley during the mid to late 19th centuries? So with all of these in mind, to consider the hay press is to consider the meteoric rise of industrialism in the United States following the Revolutionary War. So here in the Upper Hudson Valley, we have a lot of old Dutch farms, small holdings, manor estates rented, and all of them, in addition to whatever cash crop agriculture they're engaging in. And these cash crop agricultures, these are farms that are producing things that are being sold as far away as the West Indies to supply sugar plantations and things like that. They're all operating with farm animals, and those farm animals need hay. So hay production is an integral component of the agricultural setting here from the earliest days of the Dutch settlement onwards. What changes after the Revolutionary War is the rise of large metropolitan areas that no longer have a suburban area that's going to support the agricultural needs of the city and the animals in it moving the city. So, New York City, which I think at the beginning of the 19th century is not the epicenter population in the Northeast. It's one of the major cities, but by the middle of the 19th century has become the metropolitan part of the United States. This rapid change that occurs, this growth of the city. The entire city is moving on the backs of horses. The entire city is moving with draft animals. The entire city, and this is when I say the city, the economy of the city, and in this way, one of the touchstone economies of the United States that kind of defines who we are, what we are, how we spend our money, how we make our money. All of this is being moved by draft animals, and all of those animals require hay. And so, without a suburban area, as the city sprawls and grows out and quickly subsumes the old agricultural districts in farming communities like Brooklyn, for example, the need to get hay shipped in on an industrial scale becomes preeminent. And so, with that in mind, looking at Greene County, what you see by the mid-19th century is the development of devices like this. And I'll put this one up there just so we have it in the back of our minds. This is William Bullock's hay press. William Bullock, who is, I think, born in Greenville, And he's an inventor who develops, he's one of the members of the Bullock family of people who are patenting and developing agricultural implements here in the Upper Hudson Valley during the 1840s, 50s, into the 60s. Develops this hay press, which is a vertical hay press that is designed to create a bale that's about, I think, what, 200 pounds is the average size of these things. They're immense. Specifically to ship these things on an industrial scale elsewhere. When you look at a device like this, what you're looking at is a decision by a local farmer to invest in a piece of machinery that is going to benefit him strictly in a broad sense of his participation with a faraway economy. He's not going to be using this hay press to produce bales that are going to be stored in his own barns. He's not going to use these bales to feed his own animals. He's decided that in addition to whatever he's producing to make his farm operate, he's going to create something for export that's going to go elsewhere. Now, I've dropped a lot out here for everybody to chew on already, as it were. I generally like these to be a bit more of a seminar session, so as I'm saying anything, if you want to raise your hand and interrupt me, if I say something that's not quite clear to you, interject, ask a question. I'm happy to digress, especially since we're not beholden to a set form of PowerPoint. So, that's S.W. Bullock's hay press, but when do hay presses start to appear, and in this case in Greene County? So we're just analyzing this from the standpoint of, here's Cooksaki, here's the Greene County Historical Society. When, as a farmer in Greene County, do we start to see these hay presses getting used? And so here is a page from the Catskill Recorder. And if you'll zoom in right here, and this is, again, this is a little taste of what the research process is, spending hours and hours reading pages like this. We'll zoom in here, and this, which is very inconspicuous at first. A farm on the Cooksaki Turnpike about 2 miles from the river, containing about 130 acres, 30 of which is Cooksaki Flats, so nice fertile lowlands. Mentions down here, good buildings and a hay press. This is 1829. Yeah.
Can you explain to me how, does the hay go in the top part?
Yeah, we'll get, actually, why don't we do that? Why don't we do that? And actually, that's a good question to bring up. We're asking, how does a hay press work? And that's a good question because it changes over time. And this hay press in 1829 here that we see advertised for sale on a farm in Cooksaki, we have no clues about its design. So when we're thinking about the Vanderzee press that the society has, we know here's a very specific form of machine that's going to accomplish its task of making a bale in a very specific way. But over the course of the 19th century, the designs of hay presses vary by region. So a hay press in Texas, and a hay press in Georgia, and a hay press in Maine, and a hay press in New Jersey, and a hay press in New York are all going to look different, and they're all going to operate slightly differently. The idea is generally that you're going to use a simple machine of some sort, a screw, a lever, piston action to load hay into a chamber, and then make the walls of that chamber move in. So in the 1790s, for example, the 1790s, we have, let's see, I'll pull this up right here, hay press patents. This is an abstract of patents that were issued by the U.S. Patent Office in 1802. And what you'll see on here as you're looking, this one should have, if I pulled up the right sheet, machine for hoops, machines for stamping, machines for spinning, machines for beating out rice, a pressing machine. Right here. Richard and John Thorne of New York. That pressing machine, it's very probable, based on surviving examples of patents from that time, that these early pressing machines really look like a cider press. Has everybody seen a cider press? They know how a cider press works. You have a screw and a flat pedestal and a chamber. And you take that screw and you spin it down, spin it down, spin it down, spin it down. And as it spins, it applies force and pressure to squish whatever's in there. In this case, hay. And the more you can compress the hay, the more hay you're going to fit into that bale, the heavier it'll be, but it's more that you're going to ship out and more you're going to get for the weight. So this is an early example. The problem that we have in this period from the 1790s right up to the 1830s is that the U.S. Patent Office burns. And with it, all of the drawings for every hay press that was patented during that time were lost. We have no sense for what these designs actually were. We can only infer clues from these abstracts that were issued. So here's 1810. Somebody describes a baling press on this one, which is interesting because rather than just calling it a press, so we've got here a cheese press, but a machine for pressing cotton, etc. Again, by V.W. Thorne, Richard and John Thorne of New York. In this case, he specified that this thing is here to create a bale for a specific type of agricultural product. It's interesting, you see a lot of these early on describe them as being for cotton, because cotton has the same shipping requirements that hay does at the beginning of the 19th century. As cotton is becoming a cash crop, you see people developing machines that are going to be making that cotton exportable in large quantities. And a cotton press, right up to the end of Southern cotton as a phenomenon after the Civil War, they all use a screw drive, a big worm screw again, to drive that bale down and then band it and ship it.
Also square?
They're all square, yeah, they're all
Everything's
square,
square.
yeah, so they're all square. Are we all with this so far? I again appreciate everybody's patience as I fumble through this without a slideshow. Class?
A tangent.
Yes?
Are those thorns the penny thorn calder people?
I don't think so. I don't think so. It's a good question, though. And Thorne is a Jewish surname, too, which is interesting. So here you have people who are inventors here patenting, who are Jewish businessmen potentially in New York. I got to ask if they're related to John Thorne in Catskill, who's the MLB historian.
They were Southwesterlo and Outer Queens.
Okay.
The family that I visited.
That might be worth checking into then. I skipped over that because I don't have a way to view the specific type of press they were developing. Let's see, we've got another one on here. Machine for Pressing Cotton or Other Bale Goods by Jacob Idler. And that's 1802. So you see very early on, this is, the founding fathers are all still alive. They're all still quibbling about, whether everybody's going to be a Federalist or a Democrat. And the rest of the United States is worried about creating exportable agricultural products on a large scale. So these baling presses are integral to that whole process of creating the agricultural powerhouse that comes to define most of the United States by the time of the Civil War. Now, remember I was saying hay presses by state vary. So as part of the research for this process, taking the press that the Vanderzees had on their farm, trying to figure out who designed it, who built it, where this design might match up, I ended up going to Google Patents and going through every patent for a hay press, for a baling press, for a cotton press from between 1835 and 1880 was when I kind of drew the end of that search. And I'll get into why 1880 in a minute. That's because Peter Diedrich and company just kind of take over the market in the Northeast and make the best machine possible in Albany. But during this window period, when we know the Vanderzee press from the agricultural accounts of the farm, we know their press is on that farm by 1872, but based on the price they paid for it, myself, Ted Hilscher, and a couple other people who've looked at this have decided that it was probably a used machine. So that means 1870, 72. Anytime prior to that, it's very probable the machine could have been built at some time in that window of the last 20 years prior. Using what design, we don't know. So I go back to Google Patents, and I've combed through state by state, finding patent designs to see what matches what. And so, for example, we go to Virginia. Here's a press from 1839. And this is a cotton press again. This is Virginia. This is a slave economy producing cotton in the South for export. So the presses they're designing are optimized for cotton. And what you have is a machine, again, making a square bale. You load a chamber at the bottom, and then you use a capstan, a worm, up here. This gear would turn and pull these arms together like a pair of scissors, and it would start and then slowly pinch down, and the floor, or in this case the roof of the compression chamber, would press downwards on the thing to create a bale. These are huge machines. They're 2 stories high in some cases. They're dangerous. They have this tendency to kind of come apart at the seams if they've worn out and they've been used too much. You know, so you can find people being injured by these things just by nature of the design of the device. You'll find, you know, as somebody was compressing something, when they let the pressure off, the whole thing comes to pieces and the arms go flying back out, and somebody gets smacked off of a, you know, the loft of a barn by one or something like that. These are important operations, but the variations in design, the idea is to increase efficiency, increase safety in a lot of cases. There's a guy in New Baltimore who's patenting safety doors for hay presses in the 1850s, doors that wouldn't just splinter and blow up in everybody's faces under pressure. So all of these evolutions are all taking place at this time.
They're mostly wood then.
Yeah, almost exclusively wood. You know, they have iron fittings on them for, you know, the important wearing joints and things like that, but you're using wood because it's repairable. You know, it's not an expense. The Van der Zee hay press is interesting. We'll get into that in a bit because you can see decisions were made over time and possibly replaced parts with metal in order to increase the durability of the machine. The Van der Zee press also has a repair on it, where I think the entire top of it came apart at one point under pressure. So that was a Virginia hay press. Let's see if we can find one from Massachusetts at the same time. No. Try Indiana. So here's 1843 in Indiana. And this is getting pretty abstract here, but let's see, we'll rotate that. And here you have a machine. This is interesting. This whole thing's using a counterweight. I haven't looked at this before. This is cool. So you've got a counterweight up here and a screw on the bottom. This would press down while another capstan is turning this, pushing upwards to a compression chamber. So you've got these double acting features on there. And you can see on here, you see these ridges, they look like teeth. Those are planks viewed edgewise. And the reason for the gaps is because once you've created a bale, and this is something you'll see on virtually every press you look at, those gaps are so you can put banding around the bale through an air gap so that you can seal it up so when you take the pressure off, the bale you work to form stays put. And the banding material can be anything from wire to steel. You'd actually see steel banding on cotton bales, steel and iron banding, because the pressure of a cotton bale especially is so tight. But baling wire, you know, that you'd see, the baling wire that would be used on the Van der Zee press, I think Ted Hilscher has an example. It's very similar to modern baling wire. So now the cool thing about these patents, every single one of them, it tells you the guy who developed it, where they're from. This is all post-patent office fire, mind you, everything that's on Google patents. And he will give a description of how his press varies from ones that have been patented in that state previously, and then he'll give a breakdown of exactly how it works and how it functions. The most successful of these are ones that use principles that a farmer would be able to grasp and repair and work on. So, especially here in New York State, what you'll find, actually let me just show you a few more. We've got Texas, for example. I think this is the one from 1869. This is interesting. So here is Texas in 1869, so this is another 20 years after the last two presses we looked at. This is after the Civil War. Here's a mobile hay press. It's kind of like a mobile baler that we think of today, but again, the important thing you have to remember is when we're talking about hay presses, we're talking about a different order of magnitude than a standard hay bale. We're talking about something that's unwieldy, that you'd want to load on a wagon, drop on a ship or a barge, and ship off somewhere else. So this device, you wheel it out to its position, you could load a chamber, and then that big arm across the top, that's your capstan. and you'd hitch that up to an animal, or you'd have a couple people pulling on it. You'd walk it around the outside of that machine, it would spin, and the gear mechanism would operate the compression chamber to press a square bale. And then, cool thing about this one, unlike every other press we've looked at so far, you take it to the next place you have to press hay. So there's a speed component in here as well that you see becoming kind of at the forefront. By the 1880s here in Albany County, Diedrich, Peter K. Diedrich and Company, are producing mobile hay presses. They also very rapidly by 1900 get into mobile balers as well. So you can see the roots of these trends that create the most important manufacturers of these implements, have their roots across the country. All these different designs in all these different states are informing one another. So we'll hop back to New York because I guess that's where we are. And there are a lot of press patents from New York State. So here, let's just see. So there were 50 different patents that I found for doors, for presses themselves, for innovations on capstans, and it's all people in the Hudson Valley, more or less. This is the fascinating part about it, and you'll see a lot of the same people issuing these patents and issuing revisions over time. So just for an example, 1837, here's an early one. And again, this looks like quite a complicated operation. You've got all sorts of catch hooks here. He's got a breakdown of how the capstans and worm screws are going to operate. And you have a very, very large compression chamber. That large compression chamber, it seems to me, just in my own examinations, that you have a larger compression chamber on a press designed for hay rather than one designed for cotton. Just because of how much compression you can get out of loose hay. So that's 1837. And again, when we're talking about this, we're talking about the age of Jackson and Van Buren. These incredibly complicated industrial machines to produce these. The important one, and the one that I showed you all before, that's the Gardner one, never mind. Let's see, 1842. Here, we'll show you a couple of local ones from Cooksaki. So we've got some innovations in the 1840s that start to use an orientation very similar to what the Van der Zee press uses. So here is a machine, and this is Levi Diedrich of Kinderhook. So this is the uncle of Peter K. Diedrich, who runs Diedrich Manufacturing in Albany, which is the important one we'll get to in a minute. Designs this machine, which has a counterweight here that's going to keep the whole machine from flying back out and dropping its arms and flailing things around and breaking the equipment. So he's designed these tools in it that are incorporated for ease of use and safety of the operator, and it uses arms that are hooked up to a central pinion here, and as that pinion is actuated, those arms pull inwards and push a platform upwards to create the compression that produces a bale. This is very similar in principle to the Van der Zee hay press that the Historical Society has in Cooksaki. This principle produces a bale at the top of the machine, so you've got guys who are in a hay loft. This machine's built into the barn. You can load hay in the top from the loft where that hay is. Guys down below with an animal hooked up to the capstan would operate the machine, the arms would compress, create a bale, and up at the top again where you did the loading, those guys are going to pull a bale out that's going to be ready to load into a wagon. So this is something that you're kind of utilizing the forces of the machine to position your end products where you need them.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Is the hay from just that farm, or do farmers from all over bring their hay to their press?
That is a great question. So did everybody hear that question? Is everybody bringing hay to this place, or is this a farmer who's just pressing his own hay on his own farm? And the short answer is it depends. By the end of the 19th century, you'll see people who own a mobile hay press who will go farm to farm. They would go place to place during haying season, and they could press hay for people on that property. And this is great because just from an economic standpoint, not every farmer has to invest in their own hay press. But very early on, and this gets back to what we were talking about before with these early presses, this is interesting. You have an advertisement here for a farm for sale, and they're advertising that there's a hay press on that property already, which would seem to imply that this is a place that's first off well appointed for somebody who's going to engage in agricultural pursuits, but also that's a money-making tool right there that he might be able to offer to his neighbors if they move hay over there. There is another, and I'll just pull up if you'll bear with me for a minute as I hop back through some directories here. There's a map that was filed with Greene County. This is really nondescript. If you're looking at it saying, what the heck is that? That was the reaction I had as well. This is actually Catskill Creek. Do we all know where the old Orange warehouse was on Catskill Creek, right by the Uncle Sam Bridge? This is down below Main Street by the creek. This map shows Catskill Creek. This was probably about 1825. This map is by John Van Vechten, who was a local surveyor. This ended up at Greene County Real Property Tax Services and then was moved to the Historical Society. And it's really nondescript except for down here, that little notation, this is a survey for a sewer drain. That notation down there says Hawley's Hay Press. And that's really cool. So here is the middle of a village. There isn't a farm next door to this. There are warehouses and factories in this whole neighborhood. Even at that time, there's shipyards down there. There's docks. So here you have somebody who's invested in a hay press, who's put it down by the creek where farmers can bring their hay to it, do their pressing there, or maybe Hawley is buying that hay, storing it in a warehouse there, pressing it himself for shipping. So that's really cool. So you get a little sense, even at this time, this is around the same period that farm is advertised for sale in Coxsackie. You've got a hay press way out on Coxsackie Flats, far from the river. Gravity is not on your side getting that thing to a boat. And you've got a guy who's also bought one and put it right on Catskill Creek because he's going to be getting that hay, baling it, and shipping it right next to where he's pressing it. So you see all sorts of variety. And you see this in a lot of different industries at that time too. You see these decisions being made. People are trying to make a gamble. Does it make more sense for me to cut out the middleman and do it myself on my own farm? Or does it make more sense for me to bring it to that middleman, to that dealer, to that shipper who's going to be able to do all that hard work moving it for me, who's made the investment already? So there's all sorts of questions of scalability. Does that answer your question?
It does, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, so the Van der Zee hay press itself. We'll get back to this drawing. Well, here, I'll show you this first off. This is the Van der Zee hay press installed in the barn of the Greene County Historical Society. It looks nondescript and abstract, doesn't it? And maybe this is probably one of the barriers to studying these things to begin with, is that the accessibility of these things without seeing it operate, it's kind of hard to comprehend it. But the Van der Zee hay press, this is the lower portion of the machine. The upper portion of the machine is above in the loft, which is where people would be accessing the top of the unit to load hay, to remove bales. Down here, you have a capstan. Under the floorboards is a chain wrapped around the base of the capstan. You can see there's a channel here covered by boards, and this unit here, this arm, would be hooked up to a mule. Horse, whatever you had on the farm at that time to operate it. The installation, this would normally be much lower and behind the animal, but the way we ended up having to install it at the society, it's a little higher than it should be. So I have to say that for Ted Hilscher's sake. He really likes to emphasize that. It's important to him. But so when you look at this, bearing this in mind that you have this first floor setup and then a second floor setup, let's take a look at, where is it? This. So this, again, this is William Bullock's hay press that I showed you at the beginning. And this is that abstract image I just showed you of the press and the capstan. This is what the unit looks like just floating out in the air on its own. So here's where the floor for the loft would be. This is where the ground level is. And you'll see there's an arm here. And this arm is hooked up to this piston floor, and that is where the pressing is done. You've got this top level here, which is a sliding lid that caps off the compression chamber that you access from the hayloft. And down below, as a mule turns that capstan, this whole armature right here is pulled on this rope, and it would yank the bottom of this inwards and push that floor upwards and press the hay. So you're making that bale again, like that first press I showed you, you're making it up on that second floor level in the hayloft. Are we all clear on this so far?
And all of them were about the same 2 stories as you mentioned?
Yeah, and that 2 stories, that's either just, the height of the machine itself. You can see hay presses that are installed that aren't a 2-level operation. They're a 1-level operation from a ground floor, but the machine itself extends 2 stories high.
And that mobile one that was on the wheels, that was also that?
That mobile one, I can check the dimensions, but that one shouldn't have been much higher than, the top of this display here. That's something that people are going to have to work around and be able to access, that one that had the armature across the top like a helicopter. But this one here, this is a 2-story operation. You've got people loading from the top. You've got people operating the equipment on the bottom to create the compression. So it requires a team of people. Yeah.
Jonathan, to help people understand it better, that's a picture of the barn where the hay press came, right up there.
Yes.
And the hay press was located in the first floor. Do you see where those 2 doors are in the bottom, first level? It was in the left side in the back, where was the bottom of the hay press. And the top, you'd have to take a wagon. You see the bridge on the right? You'd have to back the wagon in to all the way to the back of the barn, or maybe they just did it inside the door because there's block and tackle on the top.
Yeah.
But where they put the hay in was that second story there. And they put the hay in, and then, as you say, we had horses, the horse did it downstairs, went around on that capstan. So it gives people a little bit more of an idea. And then I assume the black and tackle, they would pick up this 200-pound bale, and either the wagon was right there, or they went, because it goes the whole length of that barn, and set it on there. And my thing that I'm amazed at is, I don't know how many would fit on a wagon. I don't know, would you estimate how many?
I think it would depend on the wagon, because those bales, at 200 pounds apiece.
Okay, but then you have to picture, this is in Aquatuck, between Queens Hollow and Ravenna. You had to come down to Helderberg Escarpment, Martins Hill. You also had to go through Ravenna, and you had to go down Queens Hill. And the weight on that wagon with the horses in it and everything, I think that's amazing. And Shirley Briggs, who lived on Queens Hill, even in her lifetime, or married and lived there, said that wagons were all the way up to the top of the hill waiting to unload. And the weight of that and everything, my father showed me I don't know if he called it a shoe or whatever, a brake thing that you put behind the wheel or whatever.
Like an iron block.
Right, when
braking.
you're waiting or whatever. But I'm just amazed that the energy and the mountain, that it wasn't easy getting it down to the ship. And I don't know what happened once they got down to Skimmerhorn, I think was the...
Okay.
And I think most of it probably went out of Clemens, but I think I might have some things did go out into Baltimore that we shipped to.
We've got a bunch of hands coming up.
I got a picture of a wagon. I have a picture of a wagon loaded with bales. They're about, as they around 11 bales.
11 bales. Okay, so
On
that's...
4 horse in the front. Or maybe it had 2 horses, but I always wondered about going down Queens Hill with a load that heavy.
Well, that's those shoes that Lynn is talking about too, that you drop before the wheel.
Stop the horse, but when you're moving, you have to have a serious brake on the wagon. Of the horses are gonna be
Well, that's what that shoe that Lynn is talking about is more like a wedge that would be dropped down in front of the wheel.
And then how would you get that out?
It would be hooked up to rope. You know, you'd have that, you know, moving something like that, I'd imagine, and just picturing how it's done with like bluestone, for example, you'd have these shoes that would be dropped, but you'd have somebody walking alongside in addition to the person handling the team in a scenario like that where you're navigating. It wouldn't be just, you know, the drover himself doing all of that. You know, that's a multiple person operation, because if something goes wrong, you know, that's it. There's like zero room for failure there.
And one person could pull that shoe out?
Well, that shoe would stay on as like a skid. It would stop the wheel from rotating, and it would just kind of slide downhill. You'd be relying on the friction of the weight of the load rather than the wheels rotating to get it down a steep grade. When you get to the bottom of that grade is when you take the shoe out.
It's like a sketchy process.
It was a sketchy process.
And touring up the roads.
Well, yeah. So-
Also, on ice, you know, in winter.
They didn't do it.
They didn't do it. Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's a good question. Yeah. So a lot of questions here. And Lynn's clarification, I should add, the last time I gave this talk, I had the luxury of speaking in front of that machine. So I was in a barn, I could point up and say, that's the second floor, behind me is the machine, that's where the donkey goes.
See something like that.
I know, it's very abstract. It's very abstract, but all of these machines, and I think this is the important takeaway here, when we're looking at this in this moment, every farmer who's operating one of these is going to have a grasp of all the mechanical processes that are going into the operation of this unit. That's a remarkable degree of literacy just in the operation of the machine. You know, they're going to have had a grounding in some of these simple machines and the use of levers and things like that. But the end result is you've got this important tool that's used for almost a century, just with slight variations, that powers the city of New York. You know, think of this as a modern oil well. But Lynn, thank you for the clarification. I didn't know that was your barn either. That's
Yeah.
great.
It still exists today, but the Collins family have altered it.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, a hay barn that survives that long too is kind of remarkable in its own right. At the Greene County Historical Society, the current hay barn that's there is the third one on the footprint of that site. There was a very large one, actually probably almost double the scale of the Vanderzee barn there. It was a huge, and there was, I believe there was a hay press on the Bronx campus at that time as well when that hay barn would have been put up, but that's replaced by the Lincoln auction barn that everybody's familiar with, which again, that burns as well. But you know, these are put up, you know, exclusively for large-scale production. When you see a barn like that, that is a farmer who decided, rather than taking the old Dutch barn that the family had and just making it work going forward, they decided to replace and rebuild and make a barn that was custom constructed to serve one function, which was to produce hay and export that hay.
That's what this barn was, because it was a Dutch barn first, and they reused part of the beams and everything.
Yeah, and it evolves and it's
redoing
changed.
it. And 1870 was the date painted on it, and the diary where my great-grandfather, he recorded in a log the hay press price. And when this was taken out, I went back to the log and found it.
Yeah. So that's, and that information was what kind of gave Ted and I the grounding for some of the date ranges we were looking at. So that, you know, the preservation of this primary source material lays the foundation for further research. So that's so important that you held on to that and saved it and made it available. So this is, the Lynn Vanderzee fan club is here. But you know, Ted and I were very excited about this, and this is what fomented searching through Google patents for these things. But to get back on track for a moment here, not that we're off track, I love these questions, they're spot on. I just want to get back to my file directory here and show you some interesting odds and ends. So here's another rendition of the Bullock hay press. This one's a little cleaner so you can see some of the lines on it. You can see again the follower, that piston head inside the chamber. You see the doors, you see this sliding lid on the top that could be moved off so you could access the bale and do the loading. Now, like any good invention, these are also a source of contention. So S.W. Bullock develops this press, which I would describe, based on the design, as a lever hay press. It uses a lever to actuate and move the follower, create the compression. In the Catskill Village Cemetery, when William C. Van Hoosen died, he decided the important thing to etch in granite forever and in perpetuity is original inventor of the lever hay press. So Van Hoosen is another one of these guys who's working at the same time that the Bullocks are. He's working at the same time that Nicholas Lampman is in Coxsackie. He's working at the same time that Diedrichs are patenting these over in Kinderhook. It's actually quite a condensed cluster of guys who are all probably going to each other's neighborhoods and checking out the latest equipment at the farm there and saying, I like that. I'm going to try to incorporate that into my next design, going back and forth like this. Van Hoosen decided to plant his flag on saying he was the original inventor of the lever hay press. And I just want to see if I can find, and we'll pull it up for us. We'll check for Van Hoosen's patent here, because I'm not sure if I actually have it in this file directory still. That's Lampman, Diedrich. Yeah, they're by date in this case. S.W. Bullock, Van Hoosen. Here we go. So this one that is very similar to the one I showed you earlier, but so William Van Hoosen, and you can see why probably these people are getting mad at one another. Yeah, they are. And whether you want to say it's copying outright, because all these guys are inventors, they probably don't have two pennies to rub together. How can they enforce their copyright infringements against one another? But Van Hoosen could afford to put it on his gravestone at least. So here is Levi Diedrich's hay press. And you'll note the salient features. You have two arms hooked up to the follower that's going to rise up and compress the hay. He patents this one in 1843. You'll notice it also has a counterweight mechanism. We looked at this one before, so that when the whole system, the pressure is released, it just settles down evenly without smashing anything. And then, here's Van Hoosen. You have the nice little counterweight to keep the whole thing from falling back down and smashing everything. You have two arms hooked up to a central pinion so that the follower is raised up by those two arms converging together. So here's Diedrich across the river, a year after Van Hoosen patents this one, developing a very similar machine. Now, to compound all of this, in Coxsackie, you have Nicholas Lampman, who decides, geez, that's a really great design, but I'm going to use a gear mechanism, to create all that force. I'm going to use iron components so we can apply a lot more force, a lot more pressure. The whole system is much more durable. And again, you've got your follower hooked up to two arms, a central pinion, this time geared, so that gear is turning, pulling the two arms together from the outside and forcing them upwards to create the compression. So that's within a span of 6 years, you've got three different guys who could have all gone to school with one another, who are developing these hay presses, patenting them, and trying to sell them. Separating the wheat from the chaff, it's the Diedrich family who kind of ends up on top. At the beginning of the Civil War, Levi Diedrich, who's the guy who copies Van Hoosen, who's dead with his gravestone, it's Diedrich who decides he's going to get out of the hay press business, sell the manufacturing to his, this would be his nephew, Peter K. Diedrich, who, just to give you a sense for how successful Peter Diedrich was with his manufacturing, we will show you his gravestone in Albany Rural Cemetery. So there you go. Oh geez, old mausoleum. So Peter K. Diedrich, who becomes the god of hay press manufacturing in the Northeast, operates a plant and a foundry up in the city of Albany from the 1870s, and I think the firm lasts into the 1920s. He passes away in the aughts. And Peter Diedrich's designs, he takes the best of what had been developed over the course of the 19th century and adds some innovations, and his claim in his obituary is that by the time he died, he had more than 300 patents to his name. And I don't know if he was just patenting the bolts that were going into these machines at some point. 300 is a lot, but the Diedrich catalog was immense. It was a little book, and any farmer could go to it and they could find all sorts of variations of press of every size, of every material, with your choice of paint trim in some cases, and you could buy these things and they'd ship. So when the British Army is fighting the Boer War over in South Africa, it's Diedrich hay presses that are being shipped from the United States to compress and supply all the forage that the British Army is using for their draft animals. So this is an international phenomenon that has its roots in this manufacturing and this development that goes on here in the Hudson Valley at that time. Now, the Vanderzee hay press, to bring it back down for a second, it fits into this whole picture and this narrative arc of this development. The Vanderzee hay press isn't the type of machine that's being used during the Boer War, but it is representative of that intersectional moment between earliest years of the hay press after the Revolutionary War, when people are making these large screw apparatus to compress bales of cotton, to what you see Peter K. Diedrich developing in Albany at the end of the 19th century. All metal construction, things like that. How are we doing for time here? We all right?
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know the time. Class. Gene.
So what you showed for Lampman said cotton press.
The one for Lampman said cotton press?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But did do you know if he had business in the South?
So this is a great question. And you'll see this with a lot of these patents. Let me just go back to that for a minute. Because he does say cotton press on there. And that might be one of the reasons that he adds that geared mechanism on there, is because cotton and the requirements for compressing cotton are so much greater. You're applying another order of magnitude of force to create a compressed bale.
There would be a narrative to this that might explain what he's doing.
There could be, but I haven't, with all of these, actually, let me show you one.
Okay,
Let's go back down to, let's see, Georgia here. Is this the one I was thinking of? No, that one is obtuse. Alabama. This has got to have a good one. Here we go. This is 1869, and if I was a guy in Alabama in 1869, I'd be embarrassed to say I patented this in 1869, because this thing looks exactly like cider presses that are being used in the Northeast in the 1780s and 90s. This is not some sort of master stroke of innovation, except that he decided, rather than one compression chamber, he has three compression chambers to press his bales. That is a quintessential cotton press. That is the type of machine you'd see in the South. It's ubiquitous down there. When you Google cotton press today, you're going to see variations of this design. You have a simple armature across the top. This thing is about as complicated as a corkscrew, mechanically speaking. You just twist the top, and it presses down. It's straightforward. Lampman's design, and this is something we can get into, and the industrialization of the North prior to the Civil War, and how that informs the economy of the South and facilitates a slave economy of, cash crop cotton agriculture. If Lampman's designing these presses, he's not going to try to limit himself by his market. And if he patents a cotton press and describes it as a cotton press, it's going to immediately attract the attention of people who are reading the abstract publications of the patent office and who are looking to purchase these machines. Even though, in all reality, Lampman's design is equally suited to pressing hay and relies on designs that are a convention of hay presses in the Northeast in the 1840s. But it would be great to find out, it's another question was Lampman's connection.
Going back to Peter Jedrick and his 300 patents, once you get into these patents, you find out that these people have many different interests.
Yes.
And so it could be that Lampman, which I think you were alluding to, is just interested in making money by having people down south buy his cotton press.
Yeah. The Bullocks actually are a great example of that too. You know, most of the Bullock family later on gets into printing machines. They're designing printing presses, not hay presses. And that's extremely marketable and successful, and they end up with an extensive career just in that. And I think one of the Bullocks passes away in Philadelphia after a lengthy career supplying newspapers. So. He was an attorney. Oh. Yeah, no, so the signature's down here. So you have the inventor, you have the attorney signing, and then you have your witnesses. And probably William Van Hoosen's wishing he had better witnesses. Otherwise he wouldn't need it in his gravestone. How are we all doing, with what I've covered so far? Are there other questions we're sitting on? There is no stupid question with this stuff too, especially since there was no PowerPoint. We can circle back to anything I've covered right now.
On the first slide you showed us with the Catskill newspaper,
Yes.
I saw the dates, like that says October. Can you go to the top?
Yes. October 13th, 1829.
And that says January.
Oh, is that a typo? Oh, no. I think that might be the date that advertisement is to be printed until.
Oh.
So, and that's a question I have actually, and I've never had a clarification of this. Different newspaper publishers at different times use different conventions to notate their advertisements. So what you'd see sometimes is the date an advertisement is placed. That's the common one, is the date the advertisement is placed. And then you'd see a number notated on the side for how many weeks or editions that it was to be published until. And that's something, so every time the typesetter's working. In this case, I wonder if that wasn't a typo.
Was it 1830 up at the top?
No.
It was fine.
January 7th. You know what this could be is they didn't change the date. It could be January 7th, 1830, and they didn't change the masthead. Yeah, because this is September 24th, 1829. Boy, I tell you, you guys just torpedoed my entire thesis. This is good. This is good. But so when we're looking at these too.
Since almanacs for 1830, right?
Yeah, almanacs for 1830. Yeah, although I don't know, almanacs for 1830, if people are still looking for them in January of 1830, they've already missed a week's worth of good forecasting. Yeah. Now this is cool. This is something that's available online. So for all of you who do dabbling in this stuff and things down, in this case, I used FultonHistory.com to find this particular edition. But if you go to, there's a directory through the New York State Education Department. I think the New York State Library publishes a list of relevant titles by county and municipality of historic newspapers available throughout the state. And you can go to that reference and you'll see that a lot of the other editions of the Catskill Recorder and its predecessors are available through the Greene County Historical Society, the original hard copies. So just to give you a sense for what that results in, and we'll jump over here. I have a lot of windows open now.
John, I gotta ask you, what house is that?
Oh, that's the Thomas Cole House.
Is it? I didn't recognize it.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the Thomas Cole House in the snow.
All right, thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. So here, we'll open this up. This is just to give you a sense, this is how my mind works, and this is why I'm still mad that I lost the PowerPoint. Working with those original editions, here is my Notes app, and all along the side here is all these different files where over time I have used my phone to take screenshots and clippings from original newspapers. So we'll go down to hay presses. Hay and hay barns. And this is what I was going to show you actually. Here's the Diedrich catalog. Ted Hilscher provided me a copy of Peter K. Diedrich's catalog. I think this is what, 1906? So we've got continuous belt presses, and these machines are unbelievable. These are orders of magnitude more complex than any hay press that was used in the 19th century. These are machines that as you're rolling the machine along, throwing hay in, it's using a gear apparatus hooked up to your drivetrain to move a paddle and keep compressing hay as it comes into the device. And that's juxtaposed with the Columbian baling press, which is a really simple, straightforward, traditional hay press that would have been commonly used and very accessible to someone even 60 years earlier. They could have looked at that and said, I know how to operate that device. So you see the Diedrich Company being the inheritor of all the legacies of all of these devices. And they're the ones who are still selling these. And these are the things that lead immediately in the following years to the development of portable balers that are being used locally by farmers for season hay like we see today. It's really quite unbelievable. I know, yeah, and you know, and just the amount that was invested just in the creation of the engravings for this too. But you see here some of the implements. This capstan is almost identical to the one that came with the Vanderzee press. It has a toggle on it that allows you to disengage the capstan from your team of animals so that you can drop the machine back down and reset it without having to back your animals in a circle. Because good luck with that. You've also got a weighing horse over there, so you see that. The most important thing with hay is weighing it for market. And so the most simple implement over there, that weighing horse, is just a scale. And you have your bale, you hook your bale up to the weighing horse, and you get a sense for the weight of the bale, and then you'd be able to market it at that weight at that rate. I think Ted shared an anecdote about some farmers throwing rocks into their bales to try to get a little more weight out of them, which is quite scandalous, but you know, anything to make a buck.
The poor animal is starting to chew on that.
Well, I met some pretty smart horses, you know. Get one over on the owner maybe, the horse would look at that rock, but. So this is also just to give you a sense for some of the other clippings that we're looking at. This one, and again, I just take this clipping, this is out of the Catskill Recorder, 1842, and it's June 2nd of that year. And in that edition of the Recorder, if we can get this to open up and zoom in, here we go. New hay press. The subscriber, having thoroughly tested his patent press, this is S.W. Bullock with his press that he copied from Van Hoosen, by putting several of them in successful operation, very important to stipulate that it was successful operation, offers them to the public confident that nothing of the pressed kind can compete with them for pressing hay and cotton. So they note the cotton thing because they're hoping that this advertisement in the Recorder is going to get picked up by other papers. So, and that's David Weber who writes this glowing letter. I'd love to, we should check if David Weber is one of the witnesses on the patent for Bullock's press. But you see here, you have other testaments from other local farmers. So here's James Hollenbeck in Hudson, Thomas Young in Abacoke. Yeah, and here's a bunch of guys who are dealers, who are all locals. Here's one from Clemens, R. and J. Lawton. We have in use one of Bullock's patent presses, and although we have been extensively engaged in pressing hay for many years, this is in the 1840s, so they've been doing this for a while already, have seen nothing to compare with it. Having used this press for some time, we do not hesitate to recommend it to all engaged in pressing hay and cotton as a superior article. That's Clemens, April 9th, 1842. Yeah, that's quite remarkable. So.
Jonathan, I'm just curious about how they wrap the wire around. Does the Vanderzee hay press have top and bottom where you can put the bale through so that when they take it out, then they just hook
Yes,
it
so
together?
let me show you actually, and this, I pulled this up earlier, and I wasn't sure if we'd use it, but I did, I have an online account with Flickr, And one of the things I did was I took some detail shots of the Vanderzee hay press. So maybe we'll just cap off with this for the day. These are some detail shots of the Vanderzee hay press. You can see some of the graffiti on the machine across this top crossbar there. That's a Niffen who scratched their name on there in 1878. Probably one of the laborers on the farm or a family friend or somebody that Lynn has to track down and fine for defacing their property. Some detail shots here. And here's the top. I've got to see if I've got a good picture of the top. Yes, here we go. So, this is the top of the compression chamber here. And you'll notice how it has tapered openings. So when the hay is pressed, it compresses up against the ceiling of the machine, and you've got this air gap that you can run the wire through down. You can open the side doors up to facilitate access. The side doors kind of collapse outwards from the sides like that on a bottom hinge. And on the bottom, the follower itself, I'm not sure if I have a, the follower itself, that's the bottom of the compression chamber, has gaps in it as well, so you can get that wire down on the underside of it as well. So really, you think about it like from one side, you can drop a door down and take a bent piece of wire, feed it through on the top and bottom, and on the other side, somebody grabs, twists, and then you let the whole thing out. And you pull that bale right out of the machine.
John, when a farmer in Baltimore, Mr. Deeds, before he died, and he actually drove the mules around the bottom part, and so he gave us a tour of his barn.
Yeah.
And when I wasn't down in, but we saw the top of the hay press. And what I understood, he said, the wire is on the floor of the thing.
Okay.
And there are grooves, I think, in the side, but anyway, the wires come up the side. They push it up, open the top, and then they're clipped somehow together.
Ah, yeah, because the...
And then with his, the end opened also, and he said they pushed the bales out onto the wagon.
That might work.
And that'd be quite a drop for the first bale, so there must have been something more than just...
Yeah, and that's my question, with each installation, because remember, with the Dietz farm, that might have been how they set it up.
Oh, yeah.
The
sure.
wire that I saw that Ted has from the Vanderzee farm doesn't have a clip on it. The
Well,
length
I'm not
actually-
sure it was a clip. I mean, somehow they
Yeah.
put it together, but theirs was, if I remember correctly, what he told us, they're like maybe half up to quarter, well, I don't know, maybe a half an inch, maybe
Yeah.
smaller. But it's a flat wire, and it's like maybe a half an inch wide.
Yeah.
It's not like just a round wire. They were flattened off, and that
Like a
came
band.
over there. I
Yeah.
think what I'm thinking
Yeah.
of. Something like the plastic that they put around things now. those
Yeah, with
bands.
like a crimp on it or
It's
something. yeah.
something like that.
I wonder, and I should clarify, I've never used a hay press. So that's the important thing here is, I can make inferences based on specific designs. You could certainly try loading the wire in while the compression chamber is lower and pressing with it. I could see that getting clunky with trying to load hay and at the same time the wires are hanging out at the top of that. I don't know.
No, I know, yeah. I wondered that too, but I was pretty sure that's what he told me.
But Mr. Dietz has firsthand experience,
Yes.
and we are burdened with that valuable evidence as opposed to my wild conjectures.
No,
So,
I'm sure they use other wires.
isn't Mr. Dietz the one who also made the comment to Ted once about, the wood in the barn, those 24 by 16 beams? And is it
I don't know.
Ted Hilscher was, again, I wish Ted was here for this, but interviewing a guy in New Baltimore about the size of his hay barn and the beams and the vents themselves. I said, why did they make the beams so big? And the guy looks at Ted and says, well, they had to use the wood up somehow.
It sounds like it.
Yeah, that's a legendary one. I love that. But go back here for a second too, because I had alluded to this earlier, and I didn't notice this until right before the presentation that we gave in September at the Society. The top of Vanderzee Press has these extra boards sistered on. And I don't know if that's original to the design or if those are replacements, but I could see those being replacements because if you had a notched top brace like that. You have this thing here, this piece of wood, and an identical one on the other side, on the other side of the top of this door, are the two pieces of wood that are holding back all the force of that upward pressure as the follower rises to compress the hay. And that certainly looks like, and it's mirrored on the other side, looks like a catastrophic failure, where at some point as it was pressing, that wood buckled and cracked, and they had to cut it out and notch it and put new boards in and bolt them in.
So if you were a farmer and you wanted to buy a hay press, did you get plans or did you get the wood pieces delivered to your house? Like, not your
Yeah, like
house, but you know
Sears,
what I mean?
Sears Roebuck, yeah,
Sears
an erector
Roebuck. How does that
set.
work?
Actually, that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that, but the pricing for like the Vanderzee press, for example, I think it was what, $200 that the Vanderzees paid for it?
No, it was $79.
79, yes. And a new comparable one at that time was like 200. So there's like, so you have these two different, but just logistically, moving something like that, you would have to do some disassembly. So I don't know if these are being shipped intact. I doubt it, but I do know that because of the kind of complicated castings that you have that are parts of this, you probably have to have somebody who knew how to assemble it from plans, put it together with you. I don't know if there's like a sales rep from PK Diedrich and Company who would come down and help you, or if they give the measurements in a diagram or something. I have no idea. Yeah. That's a great question. Yeah, Wes has
There may be clues in that booklet about how they do it.
That's a good point. Yeah, so actually we could go back and check Diedrich's and see if they give descriptions of shipping.
What about people making their own?
I haven't seen, it wouldn't surprise me if that was happening, because again, all these farmers are literate enough to operate these, and a lot of the principles are very simple on their face. There are foundries, there's a foundry in Catskill as early as the 1820s that could do job casting on demand for somebody. If they came in and they said, I need a particular joint made in these dimensions, they would cast it for you. So a farmer who really knew their stuff could cut the wood to dimension, have metal components custom made on order at a local foundry, and then produce something that might match what his neighbor had. I have no idea. That's a good question. It wouldn't surprise me though. Has anybody seen an example of a homemade hay press?
My great-great-grandfather talks in his diary about building my hay press. And so he started, took like 3 months or so to build this thing, which I gather was a barn.
What year is that?
1845 or something.
1845, all right. So there we go. So we've got an answer right there about
In this
constructing.
case, it sounded like he built it, but he must have had plans.
He could have, or he could have gone to a neighbor's farm and looked. This is the question. And I think this is something that, especially if we're talking generationally, I'm very distant from the idea of you being able to walk down the street and essentially have access to everything needed for everything from small-scale home economy like canning needs and things like that to manufacturing simple machines for your farm. There was a time where you could walk down the street and you had access to the foundry, you had access to guys with mechanical know-how who could do that with you. The supplies were all there. It's interesting to think about. Any other questions?
Jonathan, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you all for your patience. I know this was a little more scattered than it could have been, but I appreciate everybody accommodating me with my lack of a PowerPoint show.
It can be done.
It can be done. Should it be done?
Just as an aside to Jonathan, we found out through some research that, for those of you who know Cleveland's the Bruno store, down at the bottom of Westerlo Street in Baling, there was a house that's now been taken down next to it. 1825, there's a deed for a sheriff's sale, where that house that came down that was identified then as the hay press lot.
Oh, that's very cool.
And that's right across from Levi Blaisdell's home. So whether you would feed it from the upper part, from Main Street, that lot drops down quite a ways. Bales would come out the bottom and just go off to the wharves. So,
We'd have to go down all those hills.
That's fascinating.
we're going to rock it down there. That's great, thank you all.
Yeah.
Good to see you again, Jeff. Thank you.
Appreciate everybody's time. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.